papers. A lot of papers here.
I can't put my finger on it, but there's something different about you today, Charlotte.
Well,
welcome to Oddball. I'm Amin Elhassan, and sitting in for a very diseased, ill Charlotte Wilder, it's Pablo Torre, all the way from New York City.
a slightly less diseased Pablo Torre is
you
here.
go.
As your New York City correspondent, I flew in just to talk to you about what today, Amin?
About the New York Knickerbockers. We'll talk to Vinny Goodwill about his conversation with Joe Dumars a little bit later. But first, I want to start with Pablo Torre, native New Yorker, lifelong Knick fan, long-time suffering Knick fan, right?
Yeah, Knicks betrayer as well.
Yeah, that's
late
right.
in life.
There was that whole Philadelphia thing that happened.
Which makes me feel like I'm just fogging the glass of an insane asylum right now because Embiid is hurt.
Yep.
And the Knicks, and I should also say for people who don't know my oeuvre, Amin, I'm the Jeremy Lin guy.
That you were the guy that wrote the Linsanity story, the cover story for Sports Illustrated.
2 cover stories, Amin.
There was a second one?
There were 2 covers, consecutive weeks. And now there'll be, I guess, like a bathroom towel in a weird resort that SI is sponsoring somewhere in lieu of actually making a magazine. I digress. It's just insane to me that... Well, I hate that I walked into that. This is clearly the most fun the city has had since 2012, since Linsanity, and it's not close. And so all of this feels like I've made a terrible decision, can't fully enjoy this, but have to fully acknowledge how unbelievable the city feels right now.
Now, you know it's not like registering for membership at a country club. You can merely toss aside one allegiance and pick up another one and keep it moving. And most people aren't even going to fact check you.
No, those side talk guys, they're going to bully me. They're absolutely going to bully me.
Outside the garden?
Yeah.
You got to come into like the 8th Avenue entrance. They're always on 7th Ave. That's what I've discovered. They're always right there outside like the subway entrance to Penn Station.
Yes, those subway grates that you love to huff when you go through the city.
Oh, mwah.
That's the smell of what the Knicks championship parade is going to be. Just like fumes and toxicity and just truly a delirious joy.
So let's put all in perspective. They're 32-18, but they're 15-3 since acquiring OG Anunoby. They have one of the best defenses in the league in that span. They have the second best net rating in that span. And they've looked dominant on almost every night that they play. And that's including games without Julius Randle, who's been injured. Mitchell Robinson has been out for the entire time. And so this isn't even them full strength. How much do you allow yourself? You mentioned what the championship parade is going to smell like, right? How much do you allow yourself to truly just fantasize?
I mean, it's a Jalen Brunson fantasy. Like, let's be specific. I'm somebody who thought, I think I compared him on air at one point to a Honda Civic. And that was a compliment, just to be clear.
It's a great car.
When I show up at a Hertz, I love a Honda Civic.
Yeah.
Has never steered me wrong, as it were. It's safe, reliable, not fancy in any way, but will make sure you get home safe.
You know what I'm going to say? I'm going to up it a notch. Have you ever driven, you've never seen this at a Hertz, the high-end Honda Civic, like the fully loaded Honda Civic?
So I have not gotten those, but watching Jalen Brunson, I'm now beginning to wonder what that might be like.
I'm telling you right now, the fully loaded version, other than just, hey, it's not that big because the size is going to be the size, it's got all the amenities of some of the most luxurious luxury cars out there, right? The fully loaded Honda has everything that, an Acura, which is the luxury Honda line, a Lexus, a Mercedes, all these cars, like, you kind of maxed out at this point of what you can do to how much better it can be. And so even though you don't have the name brand of like, oh, I drive a BMW, you have all the amenities. And that's what I feel like Jalen Brunson is. As people continue to say, well, I don't know if you can win if he's your number one, or I don't know if he's a star. You have Kenny Smith talking about they rarely step on the floor and say they have the best player on the floor. You had Coach Becky Hammond say,
yes,
like there's been
is
a lot.
He an all NBA guy?
That like questioning, and a lot of it to me, Pablo, feels like optics, right? People are fooled by optics. And I said this on Levitard last week and people lost their mind. I said, it's the same thing that happened to Steph Curry a decade ago where people said, oh, he's good, all right, but he can't be your best player.
Yeah, I'm not trying to break into this car.
Right.
I'm not trying to steal this thing. But when it shows up and drops 40 on me and it handles those tough turns. Let's torture this metaphor. But I watch him. I mean, so much of the guard, and let's just always be honest about the one thing I think that Madison Square Garden can be rightfully supremacist about, which is that there is no better and tougher building to play inside of when games matter.
Right. Which has been the big caveat with the Knicks for a long time.
That's the fine print in the car rental agreement. But they matter now, and you're seeing Jalen Brunson handle the spotlight, the pressure, the icy roads better than anyone could have imagined. And that's the proof that you need to dream on a championship. When it comes to show me that you are tough, show me that you can handle all of this shit, show me, Jalen Brunson, that you can have a bit of mythology to you.
Yep.
Well, now you point to that and you're like, he was everything that a building almost willed into existence. And so, yeah, I guess sorry for the Honda Civic analogy, but I didn't realize there was also this upgraded version that you could get.
Or maybe he's an Acura Integra. Damn, I at the wrong. I could not stick the landing. Acura Integra was the word. All right. Speaking of integrity, we're gonna talk to Vinny Goodwill.
This is what it's like to co-host this show.
Yeah, we'll talk to Joe Dumars about the integrity of the 65-game rule and a lot more right here on Oddball. Our next guest is a senior writer for Yahoo Sports. You hear him on his own podcast, The Good Word. You also hear him on SiriusXM NBA Radio, sometimes alongside me. That's right, it's Vinny Goodwill. Welcome to the show, Vinny. And I guess we're going to get started with the thing that you did last week that had the world on fire, which is you sat down with Joe Dumars, and Joe Dumars basically said, if you don't like the 65-game rule, bring it up with your union rep.
Isn't that bad?
Did I paraphrase it right? Like, that's basically what he said, right?
He said it was collectively bargained. And if you look at the paperwork, it was clearly collectively bargained, which means not only do you have to take it up with your local union rep, you must also take it up with the departed from her job, Tamika Tremalio. Not dearly departed, just go for the job. And I mean, you know how these negotiations go. You give up something, you get something back. For me, what did the players actually get back for something that momentous? Now, for me, whether it's a voter or a person that covers the league or whatever it is, I don't think 65 games is asking a lot. But from the standpoint of a negotiation, I better be getting something back of real substance if I'm giving that up, because that controls a lot of money.
It's not so much what the number is as much as it is having a number. Whatever the number is, I just think it was something that was unnecessary. I don't think any of the voters really, you could tell by the voting patterns that most of the awards are going to guys that play games, and I just didn't feel like it was a priority. And so why, like I'm with you, why the players would throw that in there? What did you get in return for it? Maybe that puts it into a context that's a lot clearer. Either way, it seems to me very foolish that they would allow for that to happen without getting something of substance in return. What was the thing that surprised you the most, though, about your conversation with Joe D?
I mean, I think the player in Joe Dumars came out, and that even though he's a league employee and he's looking at it like, you know, in a way, he's almost incredulous about it as a guy who played in a different era and a guy who qualified. If this 65-game rule would have been in place back then, he would have qualified for the season awards every season except for his last. I think the thing that surprised me the most, Amin, is that there's so much focus on the postseason awards. There's been, think about this year as a whole. I mean, you got an in-season tournament, you got these awards, you're in the middle of a media negotiation. It feels like it's a bunch of things sort of crashing down at once. and it doesn't, like, the optics don't look good. But I'm surprised that there's so much focus on it as opposed to, hey, this ain't really about the awards. It's about making sure these guys are playing on these Saturday night games, on these Thursday night games. Like, there's games on national TV every night of the week, and it's not about a mandate so these guys can play for the season awards. It's, hey, we need to incentivize these guys to make sure that they play. Even though this negotiation was done quietly, there was no public leverage the players had, and the league knew it, and they brought the hammer down.
And that's the weirdest thing, because to me, if I'm the Players Association and someone says, hey, you star players aren't playing in the big games, I say, don't talk to me. Talk to your GMs. Talk to your coaches. That's not us. So the idea that the burden would be on the players from a collectively bargained standpoint to have to own up to, hey, we're going to play 65 games plus, I never understood why that would ever be a player emanated position.
Well, it's become a player emanated position because of the way the public posturing was. These guys choose not to play. Remember, there was a game a couple of years ago. Golden State, I think they had just won a title, so it was 2 seasons ago or last season. They had a Friday game in Detroit and then a Saturday or Sunday game, not even a back-to-back, a Sunday game in New Orleans. And they had predetermined that Steph was going to sit, Draymond was going to sit, Clay was going to sit. Like, I think Andrew Wiggins was going to sit. All 4 of these guys, it was predetermined from the team that all of these guys were going to sit on the exact same night. Why? Well, that's just what the science says. Even though we've come out, or we've been told now that the science it neither supports nor deflects from the idea that this load management thing helps or hurts, right? So it's like, it's almost like a crime, not a crime with no victim, but it's like somebody broke into the house, but nobody knows who did it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Who broke into my house? Who slammed my TV on the floor? We don't know. And for me, the players allowed themselves to take the blame on this. They never got in front of the load management discussion to say, hey, yes, I'm involved. The team is involved. The front office is involved. The league is involved. Yes, my agent is going to be involved because I need someone advocating for me in here. And they never got in front of the messaging. They never tried to get in front of the messaging. And it came back to bite them to the point that people who normally don't root for the man were rooting for the man on this. And not the man like the man on your team, like the man in the ivory tower.
Yes.
Like, nobody roots for management. At least you're not supposed to, because we are supposed to be employees.
There's probably no person who is more punished by this new rule than Tyrese Haliburton, who's now, him and the Indiana Pacers are playing this very awkward game of, all right, he's on a 25-minute restriction, which keeps him qualified for this because he can't miss too many more games. What was Joe Dumars' response when it was pointed out, hey, he's in this really weird situation where if it were up to the team, he'd sit out a couple more games and then they don't have to pay him the extra bonus should he make All-NBA this year?
Remember the phrase unintended consequences?
Oh.
that was the phrase. That was the phrase that was the bane of our existence back in 2016 when there was an influx of cash going into NBA teams into the salary cap due to the media rights deal back then. And it enabled, and as opposed to smoothing, it was like one big sort of cap explosion. And it enabled the Golden State Warriors to be able to sign Kevin Durant. That was unintended consequences. This is an unintended consequence that Joe says, look, as a player, I feel for the kid, and I wish there was something I could do about it. But he's also a league employee. Here's the thing that the teams get away with, they get away with the messaging, right? Even though they're on the other side of the messaging that's saying, hey, y'all, we need y'all to sit. Like, it wasn't Steph and Clay and Draymond and Wiggins that made that decision. It was the Golden State Warriors team. So you're saying, how do they play both sides? Here's how they play both sides. If Tyrese Haliburton does not make an All-NBA team this year, the max he can sign for is 5 years, $200 million, which I'm sure he will sign for, right? If he does make an All-NBA team, he can sign for 5 years, $240 million. That's not an insignificant amount of money. So you're saying, how does the team play into that? Because guess what? The team is going to pocket that $40 million. That money ain't going into escrow. That money ain't going into some regular fund. The Indiana Pacers or whatever team that employs him will be able to keep that money on their own, even though they're the ones that help cause the messaging, even though they're the ones on the other side of the bargaining table, they win all the way around.
And I hear Joe Dumars when he says it's an unintended consequence, and I hear him when he says, hey, if you don't like it, go holler at your union rep because y'all negotiated this. But that's truly, to me, that's got to be the most heartbreaking thing, because when you look at all the players who are going to be impacted by the 65-game rule this season, the only one who is materially, I mean financially impacted as a result of not being eligible for a postseason accolade or award is Tyrese Haliburton. I want to move on to something else.
I mean, I'm gonna tell you this before we go forward, because I'm not going to try to break news here, but I do want to tell you this. I talked to a notable high-ranking executive for a team last week, and he said, "Do not be surprised if this is adjudicated differently after this season."
Oh, so they're gonna rearrange some deck chairs there, maybe?
Which to me would even be more, I won't say egregious, but if Tyrese Haliburton is the one player whose money is adversely affected by this, and then it turns around and says, you know what, y'all, we tripping. We can amend this a little bit because our TV deal is done. Yeah. Because we get, you know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. Baby, I'd have questions.
Well, that's the dirty secret about all of this, right? This has little to do with integrity of the game or competition or whatever, and everything to do with we're trying to prove to prospective buyers that, hey, our stars do show up. And so you put in these rules so that these prospective buyers, whether it's the incumbents like Disney and Warner Media or Warner Discovery, or newcomers like Amazon or Peacock or Apple even, that, hey, this thing that you're buying is actually going to happen. So, yeah, I got to believe that they'd also have language in there like, yo, you can't pull a switcheroo on this one.
It's going to be a weird one. That's all I'm going to say. Like, it's a lot of things, I mean, are coming to a head right now. Like I said in the beginning, it's almost, it is a weird time in the NBA. And not that, put it like this, none of us are advocating either A, for stars to go out and play when they're not healthy, or B, that the rules should be in place. But we're also not saying, hey, healthy stars should be sitting. Like, there needed to be some level of reset of the system. We're just saying, how does that reset happen? Does the reset happen through this rule, or does the reset happen somewhat organically? I don't think we've come to an agreement on how that should have occurred.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up, because something else that's happened, maybe not so organically, and I wonder if the league has any ideas of changing it, is the idea of exploding offenses. And that was something that Joe D talked about with you, where he said basically, like, there's no set number, there's no agenda. Hey, offense, let them go. If that's where it is, that's where it's at. And I was kind of surprised that there wasn't as much of a, panic is too strong a word, but a feeling of, we got to get this under control from the league at least.
I think there's a feeling of concern. You know what I mean? I think there's a feeling of concern, but not panic, because you don't want to give across the image of panicking, because if you're panicking, you're saying that what you're seeing is illegitimate or isn't realistic.
Right.
I think even I mean, from this year or last year to this year, it's only been 1 point a game difference. So this has been happening for the past few years. It's been happening since Golden State flipped the math on everyone, and everybody said, okay, now we're all going to be Golden State. We're all going to try to maximize our 3-point attempts. The shot attempts as a whole haven't changed. The shots made hasn't changed in the past 30 years. It's merely the amount of 3-pointers taken and made that has changed this. Now, I know that there are competition committee meetings, coaching meetings, GM meetings. It is a concern from the league, but nobody's ready to take extreme action, like allowing hand checking back or eliminating the corner 3 or widening the lane. But something drastic, I believe, has to be done. Not necessarily, I mean, to slow down the exploding offenses, but to give defenses a chance, and to believe that NBA fans are so unsophisticated and brute that they can only watch a 120 to 118 game and they can't appreciate a 96-94 game, I think that's insulting to fans.
I'm not one to want to be rash or sound alarm too soon, but I have in my hand right here the top offensive ratings in NBA history. This is pace adjusted. This is points per 100 possessions. The top 10 have all been from teams either this season or last season. The top 20 have all been from teams since after the pandemic. I've got to go all the way down to 30th to get the 2019-2020 Dallas Mavericks as a team that appears on this board. And then to get something that's before COVID altogether, I've got to go all the way down to the Golden State Warriors of 2018-2019. That's 36th. So 35 of the top offenses of all time have all happened since COVID was a thing. I feel like at this point, 4 years in, we can say that's a little concerning, because when I go beyond that, where is it? The 91-92 Bulls at 43rd, the 87-88 Boston Celtics at 46th. So I start to see some other decades sprinkled in there. But again, in the top 30, at least 35, everything has been post-COVID. This isn't time to panic?
I agree. Look, Amin, if I were to query you right now and ask you what is the most dominant or potent offensive team you have ever seen, I feel like we will both come up with the same answer.
What answer would you come up with? I'm thinking about the 87 Lakers, just without numbers, just style of play, either the 87 Lakers or the 86 Celtics or the 96 Bulls, or I would throw in obviously the Warriors in 2017 or 2018, something like that. That's without looking at the numbers. Obviously, with the benefit of numbers, I know that it's none of those teams that happened in the 20th century at least.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You mentioned when you talked about the top 30, you mentioned none of them. I was going to say the 16-17 Warriors or the 86-87 Lakers as the most potent offenses because they could do it in different ways. Even though the 86-87 Lakers, they played a little faster, and then you could slow it down with Kareem. And the 16-17 Warriors that's just two nuclear weapons that's just going off in their prime. And neither one of those teams is in the top 20 of offensive efficiency of all time. That says to me, I mean, I'm gonna play a game with you. How many players do you think this season averaged 20 points or more?
Wow. 14.
Amin, you would have to multiply that. 48 players averaged 20 points or more. 48.
That's the part where that staggers me for one, but on the other hand, I can accept that because, again, it's a counting stat that has no bearing on speed of play. So everyone's playing faster. We talked about this before. When I worked in the league, I worked for the Phoenix Suns, which everyone thought was like 7 seconds or less. They're playing way too fast. If they played today, they'd be one of the slowest teams in the NBA in terms of pace. So the extra possessions that you're getting in a game leads to extra points, leads to more guys scoring 20. That part I get. It's when you
here's my issue.
Though. Yeah.
But here's my issue with that is players often judge themselves off of, hey man, if I got 20 and 10, I had a good night. Or if I'm 20 and 10, I'm a good ball player. So as opposed to maybe them focusing on a better product. You know what I mean? Because you scored 20, you're thinking, hey man, I'm good, I'm straight.
Right.
And I think we need to be a little more sophisticated, not just on the counting stats, but the way that we judge players as compared to the way that it used to be. You know what I mean? Like, that's my fear, is that the quality of the game will suffer because the way that the players will judge themselves or have judged themselves, everybody's a great player now.
Yeah, and that's the part where I think we have to now move the goalpost, right, or move the bar up. So when we say this guy's a good player, maybe it's not just a certain amount of points or what have you. That was the first half of our conversation with Vinny Goodwill. You can follow him at Vince Goodwill. Also, subscribe and listen to the Good Word with Goodwill podcast on the NBA Ball Don't Lie podcast network for Yahoo Sports. You get it wherever you get podcasts. We're going to talk to him a little bit later in the week about Damian Lillard, about the Bucks, and about his hometown Detroit Pistons. Stay tuned for that.